Nangila. My name is Faith Nangila, and I work with the Citizen Science Air Quality Community of Practice, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to this Birds of a Feather session. This session sits at the intersection of two communities that are increasingly overlapping but not fully aligned, and that is the citizen science community and the global data community. So to start, the core issue we are here to address is that citizen science is generating growing volumes of data across domains from air quality to biodiversity to water monitoring, even in health, especially in many parts of the world where data is essential in regards to tracking SDG indicators. However, much of it still faces persistent challenges. It is not consistently fair. It is difficult to integrate across systems, and it often lacks the structures needed for reuse, interoperability, and broader uptake. So while participation in data collection has increased and scaled, integration has not. So the purpose of this session is to discuss the feasibility and scope of establishing a joint RDA co-data interest group focused on fair citizen science data. Not just whether such a group is needed, but we will discuss what problems it should prioritize, what value it will add beyond the existing efforts, and whether there is enough alignment and commitment in this community to sustain it. If established, this interest group could serve as a forum to share information on ongoing initiatives and actors, building a clearer global landscape. It could also offer an exchange for challenges and success stories across different contexts, support improved approaches to data collection, curation, and reuse, and advance interoperability across its multiple facets, that is legal, organizational, technical, and semantic. We also want to explore more specific areas, including semantic frameworks and tools that can help encode, manage, and enforce data use, mechanisms for fine-grained access and control, particularly in citizen-generated data context, and practical tools and frameworks that are already being used or could be scaled. To ground this conversation, we will begin with a set of lightning talks designed to seed the conversation by showcasing real examples of citizen engagement in fair generation and use, current efforts within the community of practice, that is the Citizen Science Air Quality Community of Practice of the Citizen Science Global Partnership and CODATA, and emerging work on interoperability, semantics, and governance. Following the presentations, we will move into an open discussion. And this is the agenda. We will move to an open discussion where we encourage everyone to actively contribute, particularly around additional showcases and success stories, tools and frameworks that you know about that should be considered or scaled, and importantly, suggestions for what the charter of this interest group should include. Your input here will directly shape whether this group moves forward and what it becomes. So I will close with this. The question is no longer whether citizen-generated data matters. It is there, it is already being collected, and it matters. The question is whether we are ready to treat it with the level of structure, coordination, and intentionality required for it to function as part of global data systems. And that is what we are here to explore today. So thank you, and I look forward to the discussion, and I welcome all of you to participate actively. And therefore, I'll pass it to Nuria, who is our first speaker. Nuria, do you want me to keep sharing the screen, or you'd want to share it?
Yes, please keep sharing, and I will let you know when. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to this session. So I will. You can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so you probably have been hearing about citizen science, and maybe also with another names, participatory research, community monitoring, citizen observatories. There are many, many names for what we are doing, but always a same purpose. If we think about the science as the pursuit and application of knowledge and understanding of the natural and social world following a systematic methodology based on evidence, citizen science is just extending who is allowed to do science. And here is like citizen science democratize the access to science. But of course, there's like, it's not a replacement of academic science, but a complement, a necessary complement, especially if we want to target the environmental challenges that we are facing. But as science, and as Faith already know, in citizen science, we need to ensure that we follow protocols and practice, that we structure the data and the knowledge that we are collecting. Move to the next one. So why citizen science matter? it matters for many reasons: of the scale, the massive data sets that we can get when engaging with the society, the coverage where we get to places that science cannot reach, and also to knowledge that scientists do not possess. Also the engagement of the people increases scientific literacy, trust in science, and also the policy relevance, because we, as Faith was saying, we lack data in emerging countries, we lack data in many places, and those data is relevant for decision making. How we can engage in citizen science? There is many ways of engaging. And there is these levels of citizen science participation, where citizens as level 1 are collecting data. That's, for example, like citizens can install a sensor at their homes and collecting data on air pollution, but also they can observe biodiversity and report data on species that they observe on a daily walk. They can also interpret the data, and they can also contribute to the problem definition, to the objectives, and they can also collect, analyze, and give this data to the policymakers or to the scientists, right? Like, so there are different levels of engagement, but this is just reflecting the effort that the people is putting, not the quality or the validity of how one is engaged in science and in citizen science. So as Fer was saying, today is how do we facilitate a fair and care update of all this science data and knowledge that citizen science is already collecting. Next slide, please. There are already like many platforms, international platforms, like we have a European platform that showcase ongoing citizen science initiatives in different processes like air pollution, biodiversity, deforestation, plastic. There are also spaces where people can start their own project as Universe. There are also agencies like NASA that are also showcasing projects that are relevant to what NASA is doing, and that's the portal of NASA. And there are also initiatives that are global, like iNaturalist, collecting data from around the globe on biodiversity. But as we were saying, citizen science not only stays in collection of data, it also goes into action in protecting the environment. And also for here, I put an example of a project that started like observing pollution in plastic pollution. And then it transformed also in a project that recycles the plastics and reuse them. And that's precious plastics. Next slide, please. So I want to also present a community of practice that is a global community of practice. This is the Citizen Science and Air Quality community of practice, where we want to enhance citizen science initiatives for air quality monitoring worldwide and consolidate the use of citizen science data in support of cleaner and public health policies. And we have now a collection of actors that are participating there. And next slide, please. And we believe this is truly important. Yeah, there has been an overlap, but if we look at the world map, there's like so many places where data is lacking. And then there is like a zoom here where we have data from what we call like reference monitors. This is authoritative data. And you can see that many dots are in gray, and that's because the data, sometimes the stations, even if they belong to authoritative stations, they do not produce data in real time, or they are just shut down. And on the right, you have the air quality data from sensors, and you can see there are many dots there, and they're in blue. That means that they produce data in real time that we can use. But you can see still, like, right, like there are so many places where we don't have data. But the question here is like, do we really don't have data? I'm pretty sure there are many communities that are collecting data. It's just that we still have not this data interoperable into our systems. Next slide, please. So with this, I thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to a rich conversation on fair data for citizen science. And also, like, if you are interested in air quality, I also invite you to join us in our initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nuria, for that comprehensive introduction to what citizen science is and what the community of practice is doing. I will welcome Caroline, who is our next speaker. Caroline, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Faith. My name is Carolyn Hawkquist. I'm based at the University of Canterbury, and I'm the co-chair of the CoData Task Group for Citizen-Generated Data for the SDGs. I just wanted to share some with you all about some of the efforts, this movement of going from local to global and continuing on what Nuria has spoken of. So if you could continue on, Faith. So citizen monitoring is really about having data in our hands. And it's something that we see a lot of where communities are very engaged in practices and in collecting data around things that they really care about. And of global concern and absolute interest is air quality. And I think that's something that you really saw clearly in Nuria's presentation. And there's so much that happens at these kind of very localized levels, right, where we have local data where we can understand. This is a project that I'm showing you here about some work with schools. It was a NASA funded project and looking at air quality within schools and outside schools. And when we look at that data in aggregate, we can really understand patterns. And the work that Nuria and Faith and this community of practice is really doing is to scale up this data. And I find it really valuable and something that we need to see more of, where we are able to bring data together. You can see patterns like you can see here on the right-hand side, where you see patterns of where there was wildfire smoke that was affecting air quality throughout the United States about 2 years ago. And this is the kind of thing that, by looking at in aggregate, we can see and understand a lot more about environmental changes, urban development, different polluting sources. And it really tells us a lot about the local levels and what's happening with people. So I want to introduce you, Faith, the next slide, please, to some of our team. So this is our global team from the CoData group, where we have communities that have been doing regional reports and bringing together our understanding across the world so we can better work together across regions to understand how to use citizen-generated data within global reporting for the SDGs. So we've been working closely with Hao Yi Chen, as part of the United Nations Statistics Division, with their collaborative, with helping to develop some frameworks around how to do this and helping to understand across regions what values are held. You can move to the next slide, Faith. So our motivation is really based on this principle that we believe that we can use this local data to understand global challenges. And we aim to demonstrate and encourage these practices to include citizen data within official monitoring for the SDGs. And we work on local, national, and global level policies. And the work that we bring as a group is often around validation and quality, repositories, a lot of the data analysis work that I think really aligns with RDA. And I think there can be a lot of collaborations towards meeting some of these goals that we can bring in. If you can move to the next slide, Faith. So some of the work that we've been doing has been supporting the development of the United Nations Statistics Division's Copenhagen framework. And this is on the use of citizen-generated data and really encouraging national statistical offices, civil societies to use data from communities and think about the ethics, think about how that data is brought into their systems, and try to create best practices for national statistical and other countries to be able to basically bring in other organizations within those countries to be able to bring in this data. So we've had an engagement now with the Citizen Science Global Partnership through the community of practice that Nuri and Faith have been talking about, bringing this together for air quality. And I think this is a really compelling case study that we can work together on. If you can move to the next slide, Faith. So just wanted to share with you some about the Copenhagen framework, and also to give some idea around how some of the data that we're talking about fits in. So there can be other data that does, involve citizens, but it's often like censuses or surveys or things that people fill out like questionnaires. Whereas the citizen data that we're talking about, this Copenhagen framework, is really about having meaningful engagement with communities within the data production and the use of the data. So citizens are more engaged, and that data could then be integrated into statistics, or it might be something that's complementing statistics, or it might just be a community effort, and there's options there. So it doesn't have to necessarily be brought into official monitoring, but it allows the possibility for it and creates pathways. And I think that's really important to recognize that not everything has to be brought in, but we want to allow the opportunity for communities. So it really is fundamentally about this framework around nothing about us without us, that we want to make sure that the data has community engagement. You can move to the next slide, Faith. So it's really, this framework is really about addressing certain challenges and leveraging the data from communities. So it helps to define some of the concepts around citizen data. It also outlines certain roles that communities and national statistical offices can play. And it formulates plans of action. So over the next couple of years, the UN has established action points for the use of citizen data and how countries should be continuing to encourage their use. Could you move on, Faith? So some of these objectives that we have over the next 2 years of our task group is to continue to provide guidance for the Copenhagen framework and think about how it fits with FAIR principles and interoperability, the CEDAW framework, which we're going to be hearing more about very soon, and helps to move towards these interdisciplinary standards for citizen data, and specifically encouraging this work within the air quality space. So we want to continue to highlight these examples of citizen data and how they can be used within official monitoring. Next slide, please. So some of these frameworks that you might hear about are the FAIR principles that you're all very familiar with, I imagine, but then also CEDAW, which we're going to be talking about soon, and how basically moving on from that I of interoperability and how we can bring data together, I think is really critical. And so using the air quality piece as part of that CEDAW framework is one of our goals, so that we can look at what needs to be done in order to make the air quality data interoperable, and then how we can transform that data into an actual official monitoring data set for the United Nations so that it's standardized across the world. And it has the same sort of measurements and setup around how cities are weighted, how population data is brought into that so that the metric itself has consistency. So we want to set these agreed upon standards and aim for these guidances around how global statistics are done for the UN SDGs. Next slide, please. So I think there's a lot of areas of common interest with the RDA, certainly making data fair, around data standards and quality. Inclusion and representation of the data comes up a lot within citizen data. And I think it really matters. And when we think about data structures and infrastructure and how data is set up, the repositories that citizen data has access to being included in, and having these set up in such a way that there's licensing and ownership of the data and very clear guidance around reuse, I think could make a really big difference for this field. And that is all I have for you. Faith, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Since I'm the next speaker, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to introduce myself, but yeah, I'll be taking you through what citizen science data means to community members, especially what integration in official statistics would mean to local community members. So I also work with Teach STEM, and we've been running projects in schools where we teach children about air quality monitoring. And this picture that you're seeing here is one of the sensors that we have installed in schools. It's an outdoor sensor that monitors air quality around the school areas. And we've been generating a lot of data since the time we started monitoring. And I am based in Nairobi. Nairobi is in Kenya, one of the developing countries, and data gaps are one of the issues that we've been facing. And one of the things that we have been doing is encouraging citizen science, especially when it comes to water and air quality monitoring, to be able to fill those gaps so that the government could have sufficient data to be able to track SDGs, and also community members can be made aware of the environmental consequences and the state of their environment, even as they go about their day-to-day activities. So many communities don't have official infrastructure. As I had said before, like this school that I have been working with, it was the first time that students have been learning that you can actually monitor air quality. And that is because even the official monitoring stations that are existent are very minimal. And the ones that are already there are only in high urban areas. So meaning rural communities and suburban areas are left behind when it comes to air quality monitoring. So by integrating these projects in school, we are building visibility, ensuring that kids can be able to monitor different environmental elements where they're staying, but we're also generating data that can be used for policy reviews and coming up with policies that can help kids even in schools in regards to transport and clean energy. So one of the challenges that we have faced is the fair part of citizen science data. That is, we have the data, but it only exists in small networks. It is available, but it is not accessible in a format that policymakers can use. Therefore, it does not inform a lot of the impact that we expected it to inform. In theory, it is interoperable, but it is not aligned with official data sets and statistics. That is why most of the times it's rejected when it comes to influencing policy. The data can be reused, but it raises questions about quality, ownership, and trust. So for us, every day as we deal with community, FAIR is no longer a checklist. It's a daily negotiation because communities want to know, what are you going to use their data for? So the biggest barrier, I believe, is not technical, it's more relational. And even as we look into formation of this interest group, communities would want to know, what is the data that we are collecting? Who does it belong to? Will it change anything, or are we just collecting data for someone else's publication? And these questions are very interesting because encouraging community members to monitor their environment, and they're collecting data, and they cannot see that data communicating to any significant tangible impacts in the community, becomes a very serious problem. And it also reduces the need for community members to be involved in citizen science projects because their efforts do not amount to anything. So through the Teach STEMs project, where we are running with schools and communities, we are developing a systems thinking approach where students do not just learn about air quality monitoring and air pollution, but they can map out air pollution, how it links to traffic, how it links to waste management, how it links to urban and environmental development, and the inequalities that exist. So we are shifting from focusing on one issue, but mapping out the whole issue and how they are related in different domains. So you don't just have data, but you have communities that are well informed to ask difficult questions to the policymakers. So as I close, as we are designing this interest group, I think one of the things that we need to factor in is that if we do not factor these factors that affect communities, local communities in their everyday life, we will fail them in terms of integration of citizen science data into official statistics. Issues such as unreliable connectivity, especially in low middle income countries, and the usage of low cost sensors, which have been able to bridge that gap and which are the ones that are helping to fill the gaps that have been left by official data monitoring stations. And also we need to factor in multilingual users, because where I come from, like for example, in the context of Africa, in one nation alone, there are so many tribes and knowledge is shared across different languages. So we need to also be able to factor in the technical users and the diverse languages and then data that is collected in schools, and how communities can be ongoing stewards and not just contributors. Closing, I would say that this interest group is very important, especially in terms of where we are right now in terms of environmental monitoring and the impacts of climate change, and how it is important for us to actually pay attention to what is happening within our environment. So if we can be able to cover these scope areas of community realities, I believe we could be able to integrate citizen science data into official statistics and actually bring a good impact to local communities across the globe. Thank you. I will now welcome Mati to take over from me. Mati, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Maybe actually, if you don't mind continuing the presentation on your laptop, that's fine. I think just to pick up on one of the themes that you said, you raised, the systems thinking. I think a lot of what I'm going to be talking about in the next few minutes has to do with the let's say interoperability more as a sort of property of the system and let's say the organization rather than maybe something that is technical. I mean, it is part of FAIR, and I think we need to have also all this interoperable, reusable data. But if you go to the next slide, we have this sort of nice interoperability stack, which contains legal interoperability, organizational interoperability, technical and semantic interoperability. They're obviously interlinked, but let's say the key stakeholders are slightly different. When you think about the organizational interoperability, there is a lot of this sort of creating links between organization, trust, actually sort of creating the understanding that the data that is collected actually gets used somewhere. So I think the next slide covers some of the sort of legal issues in a way. So in the ideal case, we would have very clearly documented rights and restrictions on how we use the data, and you could more or less check them and decide immediately without asking permissions that, okay, I can actually integrate these data sets together. I think even in the best cases scenarios, you might have situations where the licenses are not compatible with each other, they are undefined, so or they're hard to find. I think this is maybe the most common thing with the citizen science platforms, that it is actually, there's no standard way of finding the data set and actually finding the information that how it can be used. So even in sort of the reality is that you may need to case-to-case authorization. The responsibilities are a little bit unknown. Is it the platform that basically is the party that you need to ask, or is it actually the manager of the citizen science project that you can actually go and ask for permission for the reuse? And of course, in case of citizen science, going to the original source of the data is often quite difficult, because you would actually need to get the permission from all the participants. So on the next slide, we have also a little bit of on the organizational side in a way. So the other issue is that if you have a very sort of heterogeneous collection of these platforms and projects and so on, it's very hard to know that, okay, is the data that is there today, can it be actually relied to be there for a year from now or 2 years and so on? And if the platform disappears, are there backups and so on? I think there are generic repositories being used, so you actually sort of back up your data set into something like Zenodo and so on. But I think it's fair to say that there's no established practices for long-term data curation. I think what Caroline mentioned, the Copenhagen framework, I think is addressing partly this, and I think linking with this official statistics organization, I think that's something that could partly resolve this issue, but I think we are still a little bit in the early days on creating this organizational interoperability. So next slide, I think, was sort of specific legal and organizational interoperability aspects in the citizen-generated data. I think these complex roles and responsibilities, so there are sort of additional sort of stakeholders in the link, agreements related to data use. They sometimes seem to be very tacit in a way that community has kind of just agreed that this is how we do. When it comes to volunteers, I think the question in a way is that can we sort of is the consent for the use of the data, is it really informed if there's some kind of sensitive aspects to the data? And then, yeah, as I mentioned, changing the license afterwards can be sort of very difficult. So I think lots of these come to light at the time when you try to reuse the citizen science data. So then you suddenly notice that we haven't documented this. We actually don't know. We need to look into this. So I think the next slide I would maybe start with a suggestion. We should analyze the whole interoperability, all of these legal, organization, technical, and semantic through scenarios. So we would look into these existing showcases where we're integrating citizen science data with the official statistics, and we would really look into what are the data flows, who are the organizations involved, what are the interoperability issues that we encounter there, and map this sort of, find the best practices and so on. I think also we should increase the visibility of citizen-generated data in the relevant RDA groups, and I think also they're leveraging the Copenhagen framework as a sort of success story or example framework. So there is legal issues interest group, so I'm involved in actually rescoping and reactivating that. So I think we should make sure that the citizen-generated data is there. Also, the Global Open Research Commons activity, so I'm involved in the legal and organizational interoperability slice there. So I think looking into citizen-generated data in that context, but maybe in the GORC overall. And then finally, we should discuss different kind of semantic tools and approaches to encode and enforce interoperability. And this is actually the topic of next presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marty. That was comprehensive. Slava, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And I'm Slava Dikhanov. I'm leading artificial intelligence at CodeData, and I'm going to tell you about how AI can support all this citizen science advancement. Next slide, please. So what we are doing, we're actually building a few AI assistants to support citizen science. And here you can see one of them. And it's very light, so you can just install it in your browser, and you can use it for different cases. So in this case, it's air quality in Paris. So you can just open any web page representing data, and it will understand all measurements. It will try to describe, and all of that information will be stored in data repository. And now we're coming to the point. So all data sets should be properly described. Everybody should know that they're taking responsibility by depositing this data. And here the question how we're going to support people who are going to contribute to citizen science. Next slide, please. So we decided to use open digital rights language, and this is quite old development in a way. So this framework was established in 2000, and now it's coming back into picture. And that's something that we are using as a part of CDIF, cross-domain interoperability framework for core access. So we are going to organize citizen scientists into groups, and groups also should have appropriate permissions and appropriate access to data sets. And of course, we need to be able to track all provenance. So this framework allows to organize everything related to provenance as well. Next slide, please. So even more important, so this framework, it doesn't live alone. We want to use artificial intelligence basically to support any kind of interactions with citizen science data. And there is a cross-science for machine learning standard, and basically we started to use it also for cross-domain interoperability framework. And we want to connect things together. We want to use ODRL and get all provenance information and be integrated in cross-science. So basically, we need to ask artificial intelligence to help us to organize citizen science and citizen scientists in groups, and also define tasks, and also provide all kind of permissions and access to data repositories to store data that they're going to produce. And this framework actually allows us to think about like composite solution to make this happen. Next slide, please. Okay, so no, previous. Yeah, thank you. So as everybody knows, in the research world, all researchers, they have ORCIDs, they have some kind of identifiers, and we need also to use some identifiers for these citizen scientists. So we decided to experiment with DIDs, and DID means decentralized identifier. And basically, we can assign this DID as a kind of entity for every researcher, for every citizen scientist who wants to participate in data collection. And this is kind of new thing. It's based on decentralized networks, and it's also cryptographically signed. So the whole idea that you can actually confirm that you are participating in data collection by providing certificates, which are also related to DID. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the idea also works for artificial intelligence. So, for example, now everybody is discussing AI agents, and a lot of people started to use AI agents to collect some information. And citizen scientists also can use these to assign the idea to own AI agents and ask them to do some data collection on some websites in automatic mode. So we will know who is responsible, who is the person behind of artificial intelligence, even if a job is being done by AI itself. And core DID features also quite related to FAIR. So DID has permanent persistent identifier that will never change, and it's resolvable. And as I already mentioned, it's cryptographically signed, and it contains certificate with two keys. And private key allows to change content, and public key allows also to confirm authorship of content. So as soon as you're using this approach, no centralized entity is involved. Everything is being managed on decentralized level, and it's kind of AI compliant. So you can build a human and AI collaboration in this way that it will be compliant to FAIR, and it will be also connected to data repositories to store data. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is a small demonstration that we created for one of European funded project, and we want basically to combine efforts from different partners. I don't know why it's not playing, but so basically the idea that we can create different identifiers for countries and after create groups in those countries. And after we can put users in those groups, and we can actually organize access. So everybody will be able to deposit and read data from another partner according to policies. And both policies are also persistent, so we can assign decentralized identifiers to policies. Next slide, please. And those policies actually are compliant. So we can ask artificial intelligence to describe policy how we see it. Like in this case, on this example, it was for the project related to climate change, climate adapt for EOSC, and we just asked to create policy to make data open for academics but restricted for commercial use, and it's providing ODRL itself. So open digital rights language policy is being created by artificial intelligence, and with a human look, with check from administrators, this policy can define how people can access data and how they can create data. So thank you, and probably, yeah, back to you, Fate.
Thank you so much, Slava. Thank you so much, Marty, Caroline, and Nuria, for your great presentations. I would like to open the floor for the Q&A discussion. Marty, do you want to take over this session?
Sure. I think if you don't mind, I would just sort of have one question to Slava. So essentially, this DID, you would have the full traceability of all the data that is produced, and it can be either anonymous in a way that it's not linked to you as an individual, or linked correctly, linked so you could actually choose in a way that you define that how the data is used, and then you have the origin. Now, how would you see sort of using this with the sensors? So could you actually pre-package DIDs for individual sensors, so you would have the source of the data encoded already from the start? thinking about the scenario where basically you would have communities that at least initially they would just want to unplug and unbox and plug in some device and then connect it to the network.
Yeah, so this is exactly correct, Mati. So we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We want also to use centralized access. So we're working on the connection of Google accounts and ORCIDs and GitHub. So we can actually use any centralized entity as an entrance point. And as soon as citizen scientist will be authenticated, we can produce the ID which will go to the centralized system. And by using this DID, we can already manage permissions. We can, for example, give access to project description if there is some project and some assignment. So basically, it's a kind of our entrance point, and after we can track all provenance information. We can see what kind of data were produced and what kind of modifications, to whom data was shared, and all this kind of information will be available as a part of provenance chain. So this is kind of convenient, and as I also said, we can employ digital workers, agents. So if person will want to create own digital worker, that will get tasks just to collect data on air quality on a daily basis running in the browser, in own browser under a specific name. So we should be able to do that, and we'll see that this is actually not a person who did data collection, but it was an agent instructed how to collect data, and all of that information will be also part of the metadata record. So we should be able to see that and track back.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. So then, do we have any immediate questions from the audience?
Hi, sorry, cannot open my camera right now. It's not a question, but because I realized through your presentations that one of the problems is the fact that the data is not accessible or fair, or it's more difficult to make them fair. And actually, because I'm part of the RAISE project and the RAISE suite and RAISE Connect that will start, and we offer a data visiting platform. So I feel like this can solve a lot of the problems with interoperability and fairness regarding the data. So yeah, I think it's one of the solutions, because it is a platform where you can upload your data, but the data remains at your environment and your own node, so no one can actually compromise them. So yes, that's what I wanted to share. Beautiful presentations, and thank you very much.
So maybe just sort of quick follow-up. When we say data visitation, it might be useful to define the concept and also, so basically what you're proposing is that open citizen science platforms would actually include the data visitation interface for the data stores. Am I right?
Yes, I feel like it's a nice way, and because we right now have, because you mentioned air quality data, we have data that have an environmental impact, for example, and people can upload them onto the platform. But if you, for example, would like to process them, you do not have access to the original data set. So I feel like that's a good solution to ensure that your data remains at your own environment without them being processed by someone you don't know, because you are the one giving access to them. So yes, I think data visitation is a concept that could be integrated into such platforms.
Okay, so basically moving the analysis code to the data and controlling the access there. So
yeah,
I think Slava, you might actually want to send the agents in. Am I right?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that we already partly covering this problem with interoperability. So we integrated in AI assistant support of different standards. So for example, if you are creating data set, you can already deposit it directly by asking with artificial intelligence running in your browser to package all metadata properly and make record in Dataverse data repository. And it does this automatically. You can also instruct to keep data in your place. So basically, metadata will be shared for everyone, but data will be still stored on your computer. But you can also send data in remote storage and connect it to data repository. So that's basically kind of the way how AI can support citizen scientists. And by applying updates to this infrastructure, we can also like move the standards and we can keep the thing going.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Lisa.
I had because this is a BoF session, right? I had a quick question about the scope of the planned interest group. And particularly because the presentations have all focused on citizen-generated data that are kind of like sensor data or iNaturalist type of data where citizens go and take photos, right? And so it's very particular data for very specific disciplines, so environmental type of disciplines, by the sound of it, at least in the presentations. And for the interest group, would this be the scope of the citizen-generated data, or would you be also interested in a broader scope of like citizen science data in the humanities, more text-based data, more data from living labs where citizen scientists come together, generate actual physical objects, like imagine scenarios, things like that?
So I think Caroline, Faith, I've been kind of tagging you as a sort of the first two co-chairs of the interest group. So I don't know, do you want to mention something?
I guess I can speak to it some. Faith, if you want to, feel free. But I think there definitely could be involvement of other forms of data, and it should be brought in. Those sort of data may not necessarily link to some of those like official statistical monitoring if it has to be in a quantitative form, but there's a lot of interest in something that's complementary. And the national statistical offices have been encouraged to look at complementary data sets too, that are more inclusive and bring in some of that storytelling. There's some great examples. I'm based in New Zealand. There's some great examples from the Pacific where you have complementary storytelling from individuals that are then recorded and have more qualitative elements. And also like local living laboratories that are doing like rephotography of like the same place over time and tell stories about changes and characterizations. And so some of that stuff may not be able to be captured super directly within like land cover change sort of analysis or something within a like official statistic, but I think it goes alongside it very well. And I think there could be a lot of space for that, and something that we should be considering is how to ensure that that space is there and is brought in to be able to complement, what the statistics are. Yeah. Does that answer? Sorry, go ahead, Faith.
To add on what Carolina said, where I work from, there's a lot of indigenous knowledge. When it comes to complementing scientific knowledge, there's a lot of indigenous knowledge. So most of the indigenous knowledge is usually passed through storytelling from the older grandparents to the parents to the kids. And one of the things we realized is that most of this indigenous knowledge is almost the same as scientific knowledge. The only difference is semantics, or the way they describe something, especially when you look at a subject matter like climate change. It's not a new concept to them, but the jargons that we have used have made it look like it's a foreign concept, yet they have all been having adaptation and mitigation strategies around these issues that have been occurring over centuries past. So I believe like knowledge such as that is qualitative instead of quantitative, can be very complementary, especially when it comes to working with local communities. Because if we are going to integrate citizen-generated data, we'll have to integrate the whole of it, because one describes the other, one speaks to the other. So we want it to complement the other one. So I believe that will be part of the scope of including even these other types of data when it comes to complementing the quantitative data that is collected through the census. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean that's good to hear because I'm working with a research collective at the moment, and they're doing a lot of participatory research, a lot of work with the citizens, but most of their methods are actually quantitative. And I just wanted to ask if that would fall within the scope or if you're really just looking at more quantitative data, which the presentations focused on.
Mm-hmm. So I dropped a link to this very, very early charter draft, which I think in a way my view was when I was jotting this down was quite broad in a way that we wouldn't like to exclude anything. I think also, Caroline, I think in a way your sort of day-to-day involvement it's driven by the SDGs and essentially any kind of citizen-generated data that can be used to address the sustainable development goals, and I think that's kind of inherently transdisciplinary and crosses sort of qualitative and quantitative data. So I just put the link to the task group. So I think yeah, but it's very good to sort of have these sort of scenarios in mind, and I think it kind of goes back into this sort of idea of mapping the data flows and including research methodology and so on. Okay, do we have any other questions, comments? So I think we had a selection of, let's say, showcases and initial sort of reports, but I think, do we have people who haven't been presenting? Do we have people who have been involved in citizen science or have sort of success stories or challenges to share? Mm-hmm.
There's a question in the chat.
For this initiative, so the interest group, I think we should go and maybe use the reflections during this meeting and complete the charter and then also go and contact people who have joined the session today or have registered their interest on Whova platform and then basically discuss, does the charter, is it sort of specific enough in a way that we have a group but also addressing all the issues of interest? So I think this would be one of these sort of obvious next steps, because I think in the end, to me, I think the fact that we have had almost 20 people in this session, to me, this kind of is an indication that there is an interest, sufficient interest for creating an interest group. So I think basically capturing the areas of interest and going through the formal process of establishing the interest group, I think that might be the next obvious thing. I don't know, Faith, Caroline, any other?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's where we really need to hear from everyone who's here. If there's something you want to put in the chat of what is it about this that interests you? Is there a particular area or particular aspect of it, of interoperability or data quality or complementary data or things like that? I think that could be really useful to hear, because if there is some core topics that are coming up that people have an interest in, then we can try to focus some energy on that.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I just saw the comment from Stephanie, and indeed the user scenarios, use cases. I think these are crucial, and yeah, I think Stephanie, you if you don't mind me putting you on a spot, I think you, in your role, you would have quite a few of these examples in mind already. So I look forward to hear your thoughts on this either now or in the document. So
actually, I don't know which role you're talking about, but I'm not part of the RDA Secretariat anymore. So I'm actually not involved in the process. But I was just having a look at your charter, and I think that having a couple of use cases described would be really, really helpful for people to understand exactly what you're trying to do and to some extent start drawing the boundaries around the scope. And um, I agree with Lisa. It sounded very much like you were looking at a specific type of citizen-generated data, but it may well be that there are actually other use cases that come up that go beyond this. That would be very helpful to know.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So, okay, I see a question on the chat about, so if I read it. I would be interested to discuss, especially with the air quality group, about bringing together different types of data from low-cost sensors to do rigorous co-location, which can add credibility to the data. And in the recent project, we set up an open source framework where you can register a sensor type and then ingest data from different instances of these sensors and collate it for comprehensive comparative analysis. So I think here, I think Faith, this is kind of your focus area at the community of practice.
Yeah, I think that will be a great conversation to have. I will share a link to the community of practice and my email, and then we can have a meeting and have that conversation. Yeah.
I agree that this could be like one of the focus kind of areas of how you can validate data. And that's definitely, I think, of interest. There's a lot of academic studies and things on that now too, of trying to basically demonstrate the validity of citizen science data and also identify if there's ways to calibrate it when it does vary. And see if there's ways to correct for it. So maybe if the sensors have been around for a very long time, or if there's things that might influence it, if there are ways that we can try to flag anomalies or things like that. So I think there's some really important work in that area.
Okay. So, question about the other RDA groups who are looking at the citizen-generated data. I mean, I have to admit, I did a fairly sort of superficial analysis, and I think there were no sort of immediate matches, but I think in a way, looking into the charters, I think you might find hits. But does anybody have any particular group in mind that we should look into? I mean,
I'll mention I have had conversations with the Earth and Environmental Data Group, in which there was some interest in having, I guess, a collab. And there was interest in potentially focusing on our case study that we've been discussing here with air quality. So I think there could be some overlapping interest across different groups.
So that was Earth and...
I think it's Earth and environmental data.
Okay.
There's also some interest groups that I saw on repositories that I think could be helpful too. That's a potential case study area. And that we've really identified is that there needs to be repositories that are able to take citizen science data and hold it long term. So like the sustainment of citizen data has sometimes been a limiting factor because there's no place to put it with like typical platforms. A lot of times don't have the sort of things that are needed for citizen data. So there's been some interest, I think, in developing some standards that would help be able to establish that with the incorporating citizen data within repositories too. So maybe some of the repository groups might be interested also. Dataverse. That would be great to talk about more, Slava. I know there's some people that are interested in that.
Yeah, I mean, we're already testing this functionality, so you can run Dataverse on your computer, just exactly like data providers are running on their servers, and everything will be stored physically, locally on your computer, but still will be accessible through the decentralized identifiers. So metadata could be findable. And AI, if AI is connected to that, AI can also understand where to find data, but if data is kind of restricted, it will send you a request as data owner and will ask to give you access.
Okay. Slava, you had your hand up for a second earlier. Was it related to this or?
I just wanted to comment on chat again. So it was something about sensors and those sensors. Just one second, from Lucie Bastin. She was saying that in one of her projects, they have sensors, and those sensors just basically delivering some data. And I just wanted to say that this is exactly the case for the centralized identifiers. So we can assign those decentralized identifiers to sensors, to any kind of instruments. We can also connect to documentation describing how this sensor actually works and what kind of data it's producing. So we will know all information about variables, units of measurements, about all connections, how it's been used, and all of that will become part of the data record. So you can also, in metadata, you can read this information and you can provide this information also to people and humans and also to AI agents. So this actually can be kind of human and AI collaboration in a way.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just sorry reading the chat. I think yeah, contact me the tab. I think that would be quite useful because they should have an overview. And I think we have this because of this sort of broad range of activities or challenges that the citizen-generated data could be applied to. I think you would have let's say interest from other groups, quite a wide range of them. Earlier on in the chat, there was a mention of the sensitive data, and I think Carol, if I remember correctly, you had quite interesting examples of what are the practical implications of the data sensitivity in many cases. I don't know if you would like to say a couple of words on that.
Yes, there can be some implications, especially around geolocational data, so related to privacy. And there's a number of practices that can be used to kind of preserve that geolocational privacy, but then still provide an aggregated measure that you can use for what is fit for purpose. And then you can also look at different ways to kind of set up the data so that yeah, like sort of like Slava was talking about, you could have different licensing for different usages, right? So you could set it so that each individual has certain thing that they're setting up. So if it's done by the sensor or the individual user of some sort, it allows more capabilities to establish those types of protocol. So you might be able to limit its use case for, let's say, commercial purposes or whatever, and the individual user could actually set that. And I think that's a important part of working with this type of data. I guess I don't know if there was something particular I said previously, Maddie. I couldn't quite remember if there was something, but that's what I can come up with right now.
So I think this was, for example, in some countries where, for example, publishing information about the air quality is actually sensitive. So
Oh, yeah. So I think that kind of the anonymity. sort of like even Slava talked about, right? You could have IDs for people instead of specific users, and also by obscuring their exact location, that will also preserve some of the privacy in those areas.
Mhm. Okay, just taking a quick look at the chat. So yeah, many different vocabularies for PM10 matter, and I think making sure that the sensors are measuring the same thing. I think this is also one of these sort of interesting parts of the CD framework, where you define the universals you define the universals in a very uniform way that you really know what are the units of measurements. But I think so you have the semantics in a way that you can express them, but of course finding it out from the sensors, I think that's a challenge. Slava, go ahead.
Yeah. Just to elaborate and what Matti just said. So we've got funding, European funding for new project called CD for EOSC. So basically, we are going to experiment with all these kind of measurements and with, of course, with artificial intelligence. So we want to make variable first-class citizen. So basically, you can see variable as something that lives together with human and is being managed by human, and human is taking all responsibility for what variable is describing. And in a way, all this information coming from sensors and instruments, it will become like second-class citizen in data ecosystem. So you can see this as a kind of producing some kind of relevant output independently from human. You can ask AI agent to track data quality on your behalf, as I said, from website, or you can just connect some sensors. You can also show to artificial intelligence all documentation about what this sensor is producing, and it will become basically data provider itself. So it will report you data, and those data will be stored in data repository, so it will go further in data ecosystem.
Yeah, okay. Any immediate questions, comments on that? Not. One thing that came to my mind in a way which we didn't really address in the presentations is how many people are we actually talking about? What is the population of citizen scientists? Like just sort of ballpark figures. I mean, because I know that some of the projects the numbers are actually quite impressive in a way. So I mean, do you, Faith, Caroline, do you have sort of examples or estimates?
I don't have a particular like global estimate, but there's many projects that have tens of thousands of participants. I've worked with a number that are around 20,000 or 50,000 for some of them. So some of them are quite large, and that's just for individual projects. So yeah, I guess I don't know exactly the numbers. I don't know, Faith, if you know any of the statistics on this, but
No, I don't have the global statistics. I know like there are big projects that go globally and they involve so many participants. Like the NASA Globe project is a citizen science project in 67 countries working with schools and communities. So that is a big number. iNaturalist as a project is also a global project being fed by many people, local communities and students. So we cannot really have an estimate, but it's something I think I can look into. Yeah. But I know it's a big number.
Yeah. So I think in a way of motivating the interest group, it is that this would be a way also for the RDA to reach out to very large community of people who have very hands-on relationship with research data. So I think this is maybe something that we should already address in the charter and maybe bring in engaging with the community explicitly within the scope, because I think that would also be beneficial for the RDA as a whole. Okay. We are approaching in the schedule to this sort of what we planned for the wrap up and next steps planning. So I don't know I could hand back to Faith if you want to sort of run us through these next steps, and of course we don't want to necessarily stop the discussion, but maybe start to move into this sort of concrete things.
You've decided to put me on the spotlight.
Sorry.
So yeah, I think given the extent of the discussion and even the number of people that we've had in this session, I believe that there is a clear interest in the formation of the interest group. And also given the scale of citizen science and the work that citizen science has been able to achieve globally and the lack of recognition that is still existing, I think we don't need to think about whether we want to form this interest group or not. I think we need to do so.
Mhm.
So for the next steps and the course of action, I think we'll need to work on this together.
Mhm. Yeah, I
You
think
can't
we
just
got
put me in
very.
the spotlight.
Sorry, you froze a little for a moment. I think we got very useful feedback there. I've been trying to copy the messages from the chat in addition to the transcript and yeah, of course, the presentations. I think we should, as soon as possible, maybe send the link to the presentations and also remind where we can find the shared note. So I think the discussion could continue sort of asynchronously after this meeting. Although I think realistically, as long as the plenary is going on, people will go to the next meeting and there's sort of the next exciting thing happening there. But I think if we can get this done, let's say by the end of the week, and then we could see what we actually additional input we might gather from the rolling notes minutes and then sort of maybe reflect a little bit on the charter draft based on this, come up with the concrete examples, and maybe also contact the tab to see which are the working and interest groups that we should actually consult
Reach out.
or reach out to, saying that, okay, this is something that we are working on. I think on my part, I think I will flag this the next week. There's the meeting of the GORC legal and organizational slice. So I report on this meeting and mention the plan for this interest group, because I think bringing citizen science in as somehow into the GORC model, I think that will be actually also this sort of slow policy development activities that then would, in the RDA community, when people are thinking about how we build the next commons research environment, then if there is a citizen science somewhere in this conceptual framework, I think that would be quite useful for everyone. So no.
I will also be emailing. I've seen that people have put their email, so I will share the presentation slides once I get approval from all presenters to
Mhm.
all our participants. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
So, Caroline, do you think that we should first reach out to the other interest groups and just let them know about what their thoughts are in line with this, or?
I think that would be a great step. I think we could reach out and see if they have any existing citizen-related data that they're working with. And then also maybe if they have some crossing interests to work with us in those areas, I think that could be really useful.
Mhm.
I've also started to make some notes of some of the discussion from the chat of some of those topics that are brought up around repositories, sensitive data, co-locating, measuring protocol, and agreed vocabularies and standards. So trying to make note of those too.
Okay. So maybe then just at the last moment to put you, Caroline, and Faith in more into on the spot because you have the sort of the citizen science, citizen generated data. You have already ongoing activities in there. So is there sort of activities related to the air quality community of practice or the task group that interested people could actually somehow join and or contribute to?
Yeah, I remember we had a discussion about having a training for the use of the CDIF model. So if anyone is interested and they would want to join the training, well, you're welcome to reach out to us. I'll just let me type my email here, just in case. Also, if you're interested in joining our community of practice, you're also welcome to join the community of practice. Here we deal with citizen science in air quality monitoring, to be specific. It's a great place to be. We have a lot of knowledge exchange and opportunities sharing, lessons learned. So if you're interested in joining our community of practice, welcome. In Swahili, we say karibu sana. Caroline, do you have anything that you would want to add?
No, I think that's good. I think there was a lot of good discussion here. So I think we have a lot to work with to start finding some core goals. And yeah, definitely interested, I guess, if there's people that are wanting to be involved, of making sure you put your name in the document so that you're included in the emails to get in touch. Because we have the attendees check-in list. So to just make sure that we're able to follow up with you, that would be great.
Then closing remarks from Matti and Slava.
So I think this was very interesting discussion. I think we have a lot of new things to go through. I think maybe I would just flag that both Faith and Carolyn, you are kind of committed to stay on the topic of citizen science for in the long term. So I think Carolyn, your task group is scheduled to continue for almost 2 years into the future. So there is on co-data framework there is a place for citizen science. So in that sense, Carolyn is a good contact on that part, and of course, Faith, you're sort of integral part of the community of practice and citizen science global partnership. So you will remain in the community and working on the topic. So I would encourage everybody to contact Faith and Carolyn, also related to the charter and related issues. Of course, the link that we shared and we'll send over email, everybody can comment just having the link. So that's also one way to interact with this. And I think we have lots of email addresses in the collaborative notes, and we were promised that we would also get contact details of the people who flagged this session on Whova platform. So we should be able to reach out and collect the feedback afterwards. So yeah, I mean, it was great. Thank you very much.
Slava, any closing remarks?
Yeah, so from my side, and I think citizen science is a great effort, and that's something that should be supported by everyone. And I also started to talk to Linux Foundation, and they are also very interested to support the community. So basically, these assistants that I was just telling you about, it should be available for everyone and should be sustainable. So maintenance should be also being done professionally and by people who know what they're doing. And it should be, again, for free, available for everyone. So if people want to join this initiative, it should be possible. And we just need to understand how to organize them. This is why they are working on artificial intelligence, which can help us to create those groups and create those permissions, describe access, and also organize repositories. As soon as we'll have all these infrastructure blocks in place, I'm pretty sure we can create super projects with millions of people contributing, for example, in air quality research. So that's future that I see. Thank you.
Thank you, Slava. I've seen in the chat we have a question from Veronica. Would you care to tell us which topic you're referring to?
Yes, thank you. No, basically, I was referring to this, what this was mentioned above, that means for general interest in the community of practice, plus the CDIF training. That means actually I wanted to know a little bit more what that means, that CDIF training. I mean, it's something different what everything that it was discussed today, or is something specific, or that was the reason that I wanted a little clarification on this issue.
So basically, CDIF is a cross-domain interoperability framework, which is basically a very simple way of leveraging existing web standards to make data repositories easier to integrate and across different disciplines. So it breaks down the challenge of presenting data discovery, for example, finding what is the structure, what are the fields in these data sets, and then using tools like ODRL that Slava was presenting to define what you can do with the data, and for then how you describe the universals. So what does it mean if it says PM10? How do you measure time, location, and so on? So it is basically a collection of playbooks that CoData is developing based on some of these projects and actually applying across different projects. So Slava would be very good contact point for really details of the semantics and technologies related to that. But the idea is that if you're running a repository and it's CDIF compliant, then it is relatively low effort to reach this stage, and then that gives you the possibility to integrate data sets. So one of the examples that kind of led into this development was the research question that if people answer questions about how do they feel about climate change, then are the answers different if they are actually experiencing acute heat stress? So you had the meteorological data and you had the survey data and you had the locations and so on, but I think it was a half-a-year project to put these together. And I think the idea would be that, okay, these kind of research questions, you would go from half a year to ideally to, in case it's Slava, it would go into 1 hour. But I think even for some of the sort of outsiders, it actually, we should really reduce the time that it takes to integrate the data. And of course, in the case of citizen science data, you would have quite a lot of this heterogeneity and already sort of correlating different data sets, but I think that's also where CDIF would help. Slava, you're half laughing and half nodding, so I'm taking that as a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely. I just put in the chat. So I mean, I also can be busy, but I have digital assistants, so they're always ready to help. So whatever I'm saying, I've been supported by AI already.
So is there anything else from our audience so that we don't lock anyone out? I guess that is our cue to close the meeting, right, Marty?